Today we are diving into something almost every English learner loves doing, but very few people use correctly, and that is learning English from movies. Most learners think they are improving just by watching films with subtitles, but in reality, they are often just entertaining themselves without real progress.
And that is exactly why so many people feel stuck after months or even years of watching English movies, because they assume exposure alone is enough to build fluency. The truth is, movies are one of the most powerful language tools ever created, but only if you know how to use them actively instead of passively.
Think about it. Movies give you real conversations, natural pronunciation, emotions, and everyday expressions that textbooks simply cannot teach. However, most learners sit back, relax, and treat movies like entertainment, which means their brain is not actually working to absorb the language deeply.
This is where the biggest mistake happens, because passive watching creates a false sense of learning. You feel like you are improving because you understand the story, but your speaking ability stays the same since you are not practicing recall, repetition, or real usage of the language.
Another common issue is over-reliance on subtitles, especially in your native language, which makes your brain depend on translation instead of thinking in English. When that happens, you stop building the direct connection between English sounds and meaning, which is essential for fluency.
Exactly. And even when learners switch to English subtitles, they often just read and follow along without pausing, repeating, or analyzing how sentences are formed. So the brain processes it like reading a story, not training a skill, which is why progress feels slow or invisible.
But here is the exciting part. What if I told you that every single movie you already enjoy could become a personal English teacher for you? Not in a boring classroom way, but in a natural, emotional, and highly effective way that actually sticks in your memory.
And that is the shift we want you to make today. Instead of asking, what movie should I watch? You should start asking, how can I actively learn from this movie scene? That one mindset change completely transforms your learning results.
So in this episode, we are going to break down exactly how to turn movies into a real learning system, step by step. So you are not just watching English, you are actually building it inside your brain.
And don't worry, we're not going to make this complicated or boring. We will keep everything practical, simple, and fun, so you can start using it immediately with your favorite films or series.
By the end of this journey, you will realize that English learning does not have to feel like studying at all. It can feel like watching your favorite stories, just with a smarter approach.
So stay with us, because in the next part, we are going to fix your mindset first, the part most learners completely ignore, but which actually decides whether you improve or stay stuck.
Before we jump into techniques, we need to fix something more important than any method, and that is your mindset about how movies actually help you learn English. Most learners fail here because they think watching is enough, but real improvement only happens when your brain is actively processing what you hear.
That's right. And the key difference we want you to understand is between input and intake. Input is everything you hear from the movie, but intake is what your brain actually absorbs, remembers, and can reuse later in real conversation.
The problem is, many learners confuse exposure with learning, so they assume that just spending 2 hours watching a movie means they have studied English for 2 hours. But if your brain is relaxed and passive, most of that language never becomes intake. It just passes through like background noise.
And that's why people often say, I understand movies, but I still can't speak English. Because understanding is not the same as building speaking ability. Speaking requires active engagement, like pausing, repeating, and mentally processing how sentences are built.
Another important shift is letting go of the idea that you must understand everything in a movie to learn something from it. In fact, even native speakers don't catch every word, but they still understand meaning through context, emotion, and repetition.
Exactly. And when learners chase 100% understanding, they slow themselves down and create frustration. Instead, your goal should be progress in recognition, not perfection in comprehension. Even understanding 60 to 70% actively is far more powerful than passive 100% watching.
Yes, yes. When you accept that confusion is part of learning, you actually start learning faster because you stop stopping yourself every time you hear something new or unfamiliar. Your brain becomes more flexible and more willing to adapt to real English speed.
And there is also something very important happening in the background. Your brain is building patterns. The more you expose yourself to real conversations, the more your brain starts predicting words and phrases without translating.
That prediction ability is what fluent speakers naturally have, and movies are one of the best tools to train it, but only if you watch with awareness instead of distraction. Otherwise, your brain stays in story mode instead of language training mode.
So from now on, we want you to treat movie time as training time, even if it feels fun and relaxed. Because when your mindset changes, the same movie you've already watched becomes a completely new learning experience.
And in the next part, we are going to show you a simple but powerful step-by-step watching method that turns every scene into real language practice, not just entertainment. Now we are going to get practical with the first real technique, and this is something we call watching in layers, which completely changes how you interact with movies for learning English. Instead of watching once and forgetting, you will watch the same content in structured steps, so your brain actually absorbs the language deeply.
And don't worry, this is not about watching the same movie 10 times until you get bored. It is about using each viewing for a different purpose. So every time you watch, your brain focuses on a specific skill instead of everything at once.
The first layer is simple. Watch the scene without subtitles. Your only goal here is not to understand every word, but to understand the story, the emotions, and the general situation happening in the scene.
This step is very important because it forces your brain to rely on listening, facial expressions, tone, and context instead of reading. Even if you miss words, your brain is still building real listening skills in a natural way.
Many learners panic at this stage because they feel like they are missing too much, but that is completely normal and actually necessary for improvement. You are training your ears to get used to real speed English, not textbook English.
Then comes the second layer, and this is where things become powerful. You rewatch the same scene, but this time with English subtitles, and now your goal is to connect what you hear with what you see written.
Haha, this is the moment when many learners suddenly say, "Oh, that's what they said," because your brain starts matching sound patterns with written language. It creates strong memory connections that help you recognize phrases faster next time.
And instead of just reading subtitles like a story, you should pause when you hear interesting expressions and repeat them out loud. This turns passive reading into active speaking practice, which is where real improvement happens.
The third layer comes after that, and this is where you focus on pronunciation, rhythm, and emotion. You replay short parts of the scene and try to imitate exactly how the actor speaks, not just the words, but also the feeling behind them.
And even a 10 to 20-second clip can teach you a surprising number of things: sentence structure, natural rhythm, stress patterns, and everyday expressions that native speakers actually use.
So instead of watching one movie once and forgetting it, you are now transforming one scene into a full learning cycle that trains listening, reading, and speaking together.
And in the next part, we are going to take this even further with a powerful technique called shadowing, where you actually start speaking along with the movie in real time.
Now that you understand how to watch in layers, we are going to move into something even more powerful, and this is where your English actually starts coming out of your mouth instead of just staying in your head. This technique is called shadowing, and it is one of the fastest ways to improve speaking fluency using movies.
And don't let the word shadowing sound complicated, because it is actually very simple. You just listen to a short line from the movie and immediately repeat it, trying to copy not only the words, but also the speed, rhythm, and emotion of the speaker.
The key here is timing. You should not wait until the actor finishes speaking and then think about it too long. Instead, you follow right behind them like a shadow, almost speaking at the same time or just a fraction of a second later.
At first, this will feel uncomfortable because your brain is not used to producing English this quickly. But that discomfort is actually a good sign, because it means you are moving from passive understanding into active speaking production.
Many learners make the mistake of trying to sound perfect on the first attempt, but shadowing is not about perfection at all. It is about rhythm, flow, and building confidence in your speaking muscles.
Exactly. And another common mistake is stopping too often to think about grammar. In real conversations, you don't have time to analyze grammar rules, so shadowing helps you train natural reaction instead of slow thinking.
When you shadow correctly, you are basically teaching your mouth to move in English patterns. Your tongue, your breathing, and your timing all start adapting to real English speech, which is something textbooks can never give you.
And here is something interesting. Actors in movies are actually one of the best pronunciation models you can use because their speech is clear, expressive, and emotionally natural. So when you copy them, you are copying real-life communication patterns.
You can start with just 10 to 15 seconds of dialogue. Play it, pause it, and repeat it several times until your version starts to sound similar. Then slowly increase the length as you become more comfortable.
And don't worry if you don't understand every single word at first. The goal is not full comprehension during shadowing. It is building fluency, rhythm, and automatic speaking ability. Understanding will improve naturally over time.
Yes, another powerful effect of shadowing is that it reduces your fear of speaking. When you repeat English out loud every day, your brain stops treating English as something strange and starts treating it as something familiar.
And that familiarity is what builds confidence. Many learners are not weak in English. They're just not used to speaking it quickly without thinking too much. Shadowing fixes that by forcing your brain into real-time production.
So if you feel stuck with speaking, this is the method you should not skip. Even 5 to 10 minutes a day can create noticeable changes in your fluency and pronunciation over time.
And in the final part, we are going to show you how to turn everything you've learned so far into a complete personal English system. So movies don't just entertain you, they become your daily learning engine.
Now we are at the final and most important part. Because everything we talked about only works long-term if you turn it into a system instead of doing it randomly. Watching movies and doing shadowing once or twice is helpful, but real progress comes when you build a repeatable routine around it.
Right, exactly. Because most learners don't fail because they lack motivation. They fail because they don't have structure. They watch a movie, learn a few words, feel excited, and then stop for a week, which resets their progress every time.
So the first step in building your system is simple. Choose your learning movies. These should be films or series you actually enjoy, because emotional interest is what keeps your brain engaged and helps you remember phrases longer.
And you don't need complicated choices here. Even rewatching your favorite movie is powerful, because familiarity allows your brain to focus more on language instead of plot confusion. Repetition is not boring in language learning. It is actually where fluency is built.
Next, you create a movie English notebook. Every time you find an interesting phrase, expression, or sentence, you write it down with a simple meaning and maybe one example of how you would use it in real life.
And don't make this notebook too perfect or academic. It is not for exams, it is for communication. Even short notes like, "That's insane" equals "That's amazing" can become powerful memory triggers when you review them later.
Then comes the most important part, reuse. If you only write phrases but never use them, they will disappear from memory. You need to actively try to use movie expressions in your daily speaking, even if you are just talking to yourself.
And this is where your learning becomes real life. Instead of saying simple textbook sentences, you start using natural expressions like native speakers, because your brain has already stored them through emotional movie scenes.
Another powerful habit is reviewing short clips repeatedly instead of always moving to new content. Watching the same 10 to 20-second scene multiple times helps your brain lock in pronunciation, rhythm, and meaning much deeper than one-time exposure.
And over time, something interesting happens. You stop translating in your head. You start recognizing patterns instantly because your brain has seen similar movie expressions again and again in different situations.
Ha ha ha! That moment when you suddenly understand a phrase without thinking is when you realize your brain has started switching into English mode naturally. That is the real goal of this entire method.
So, if we summarize everything, movies are not just entertainment anymore. They become your listening trainer, your speaking coach, your vocabulary source, and your confidence builder, all in one system.
And the best part is, you don't need expensive courses or complicated textbooks. You just need consistency, attention, and the willingness to interact with what you watch instead of just consuming it.
So, starting today, don't just say, I watch English movies. Say, I train my English with movies. That small shift in identity changes everything about your learning journey.
And remember, fluency is not built in one day, but every movie scene you actively use brings you one step closer to thinking and speaking naturally in English.
Thanks for joining us in this episode, and we hope the next movie you watch won't just be entertainment, but your first real English training session in action.